Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please join our community by subscribing to us on the socials. Our handle on all platforms is at N2E Fantasy. We are also available on all major podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's show?
On this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, we are discussing the major 2025 offseason free agents, cut candidates, trade candidates, anyone who might be available, and their potential landing spots. But first, we have some league news. Jeff, what is the latest on our league news?
So, the first thing, your boy, Kadarius Toney. He was arrested for domestic violence. This, in all likelihood, will end the 26-year-old wide receiver's career, who spent last year on the Browns practice squad before being cut, and no one picked him up. I believe he was a very high draft pick, right? Was he a first rounder?
I think he was a first rounder, yeah.
Absolutely.
For the Giants.
Absolutely. So and I think he was on the list of Giants former first rounders that won a Super Bowl the last few years, where we had Barkley on there and such. Good time to sign Daniel Jones in that regard, which we'll get to in a little bit here. But I think this will be the last that we ever discuss and talk about Kadarius Toney, which I know will make you very happy.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of his, and he has all the athleticism in the world. He just keeps making dumb decisions, and he's plays pretty sloppy when he's out in the field too. So I don't think he really has that much left. So I agree with you. This should be it for him. Is this it for 30-something-year-old former Dolphins running back Raheem Mostert, who they just released this week? He has bounced around. He looks like he might not have much left in the tank. Is he still viable in this league, Jeff? I know we're going to talk about him later.
You're funny. Mostert's coming off of 18 touchdown performance like 15 months ago, and he doesn't have much left in the tank because of one down year. Typically with players, I need to see multiple down years, but as you did mention, he's in his early 30s. I want to say 32. I'm not looking it up here live on the podcast, but yeah, I could see a reunion with the 49ers, because he's played for the 49ers and Miami. That's his only two teams. He's played pretty much for Mike McDaniel his whole career. So it will be interesting to see where he goes. But I could see him getting one last hurrah somewhere, especially a place that needs a backup running back. But as you had mentioned to me offline, there is a lot of running backs coming out in this next draft. So there may not be a seat in this game of musical chairs for Raheem Mostert.
I think there's one obvious landing spot for him, but we'll talk about that when we talk about the running backs. But first, let's talk about a couple quarterbacks. Panthers have re-signed backup quarterback Andy Dalton to a 2-year, $8 million deal with $6 million guaranteed. He's been a quality backup for them. He's done well in starting spots for them. He's a good mentor for Bryce Young, and so I think this is a good fit for both of them for him to stay. He might have been able to get more to be a backup somewhere else. I don't think he is going to get a starting job anywhere else. So it just made sense to stay there. Jeff, are you happy with Andy Dalton back with your Panthers?
Yeah, I am. This likely means that Bryce Young will be the guy to be the starter for at least the next 2 years, which I did see enough down the stretch to give him some runway now. Which is crazy, because after the first few starts last year, I was like, nope, he's not it. But there was something in that benching before Andy Dalton had his car accident and put Bryce Young back in the lineup that really changed his whole mentality. So I really liked what I saw. The growth was great, but obviously we'll see now what happens with that quarterback room.
All right. Well, our last major bit of news here is just going to be a lead in towards our free agent predictions and best landing spots. The Jets have formally announced they will be moving on from Aaron Rodgers, likely meaning he will be cut. We think they'll let him negotiate with other teams, start talking to them. That's just an estimate right now, and he might be getting 3+ week jump on other free agents if that's true. Jeff, what do you make of all this? And then what do you think happens next for him?
So I've heard that if a team announces they're moving on from you, you are allowed to speak with other teams effective immediately. Jets did release that last week. So in theory, Rodgers could be discussing deals with teams right now before other free agents that we're going to talk about in a little while have a head start. But for me, Aaron Rodgers' best landing spot would be Tennessee. He already owns a home there. They have a quarterback vacancy. They could use that first round pick for other talent. I think Aaron Rodgers, while not a good mentor overall, could be a good mentor for Will Levis. I think it all depends on circumstance and situation. And when I think of Will Levis's ceiling, it's probably an Aaron Rodgers type. So there's a lot to think about there. And this could be the one thing that's like a reclamation project for the Titans. And then they could go defense with their number 1 overall pick. They could also bring in Aaron Rodgers' buddy that we'll get to in a little while that's rumored to be cut soon.
So, I don't think he's a good mentor. I don't think there's if you bring him in, your young quarterback's not going to fix their stuff. We saw that with Zach Wilson. They moved on from Zach Wilson. They brought in Aaron Rodgers to kind of be the guy in the short term while they figure out Zach Wilson. And Rodgers immediately ruptured his Achilles, and Zach Wilson kind of improved a little bit, but not really. So I don't expect the same with Will Levis. If he went to the Titans, I expect that the Titans would try to build up a better roster immediately to compete. If they brought in Aaron Rodgers, I think the Indianapolis Colts are the next team that makes sense for him to go to because they already have a pretty well built up roster. They just need to improve in some areas. But quarterback's the number 1 spot they have to improve, so he could slide right in there. They've got plenty of weapons. There's some talk about potentially going to San Francisco as a dark horse if San Francisco isn't sure about Brock Purdy. But me personally, I'd rather have a 24-year-old Brock Purdy or whatever age he is rather than a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers at this point. So those are really the most of the spots I envision for him. Obviously, I'm always rooting for the Brett Favre shadow path where he goes to Minnesota and replaces Sam Darnold there. But that's just for giggles for me.
That's funny. Yeah, absolutely. Completely understand. But yeah, you would have to compete with JJ then. So we'll see what happens.
I don't know if it would be competing, but
you think JJ's got it?
I think if they had a veteran, there's no need to like rush him back from health. I think that they can keep working with him on concepts and get him used to watching film and all that kind of stuff. He's so young that you don't have to really throw him out early too. So that's I don't necessarily think that he can't get it or he won't be good when he finally gets to play. I just think you don't need to risk it right away and throw him to the wolves. You put a veteran out there, build up the rest of the roster again because they have to retool. And then when everything's geared up and ready to go, when the 42-year-old inevitably falls apart, then you have your young rookie savior or sophomore savior that comes in and from Michigan that leads you to the Super Bowl, maybe. Familiar story.
Yeah, we will see. But don't rule out Rodgers waiting a bit too and potentially seeing where there's an injury or a place where there's an open seat on the bus.
He said recently to a kid who harassed him by filming with the phone right in his face when he left a gym, like, where do you want to go? He's like, somewhere where a team wants me.
Yeah.
Are you really putting down Vikings for me? That's my favorite spot. I'm not saying he's going there.
Where's your thought? Because you said a lot of teams in that blurb.
Okay. I think the most likely is in fact the Titans. So I will I'm saying Titans as well.
Yeah. All right. So we got Russell Wilson, who I believe had a great year with the Steelers, got him into the playoffs, didn't have a great playoff performance, but literally had only immature George Pickens the entire year. So they did acquire Mike Williams, but you can agree with me, I believe, on this, that Mike Williams is a shell of his former self, which wasn't a great beacon of health or anything like that. But yeah, I see him sticking around with the Steelers and kind of building on what has happened so far.
Well, I'm going to differ with you on this one. I'm just trying to figure out which way I'm going to go with it. Because part of me really wants to say the Raiders to reunite with Pete Carroll, and there's the obvious opening there. But also, I feel like the Raiders could trade up for a quarterback, so it's tough. The other part of me wants to say Indianapolis, although there's other quarterbacks I'd want them to go after. I'd say right now I'm going the Raiders.
Whoa. With Pete Carroll again, that shipped him off 2 years ago. That's a bold call. And Pete Carroll didn't only ship him off to Denver, he tried to do it the year before also. So he tried 2 years in a row to get rid of Wilson. And you expect for him to come back. Okay.
Well, I think the Steelers don't want to resign him. Otherwise, he would already be resigned. It seems like the Steelers are going Justin Fields and then drafting a quarterback.
That's not what I've heard, but I've heard they're going to bring in Fields and Jones and have them compete for the job. But
you're still
I don't
predicting
see them
Russ
drafting
Wilson?
one.
You're still predicting Russell Wilson despite hearing that?
I think this is all negotiation tactics.
Okay.
I think so. Things only get out to the media because one of the two sides want it to get out to the media. So the fact that the Steelers pursuing Justin Fields got out to the media is going to put a little bit of pressure on Russell Wilson to bring down his asking price.
I think beggars can't be choosers, and I think the Raiders are going to be one of the few teams that are actually interested in Russell Wilson. And I think part of it's going to be because Tom Brady played against him and respects him.
Even in the past with Pete Carroll and him, you're going to still do that.
If Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy could put their beef aside potentially, then surely Pete Carroll, who gets along with everybody, can do that with Russell Wilson. And I really think it wasn't Pete Carroll trying to get rid of him, actually. It was Russell Wilson going to Dan Snyder and trying to get Dan Snyder to fire Pete Carroll, which led to Russ being traded.
Oh, so that sounds like a great relationship that you have proposed. And they already have 3 quarterbacks under contract, the Raiders, so now this will be a 4th.
Feel like he's going to end up between the Raiders and the Colts. I feel like it's going to be one of those two teams. It's just hard for me to...
The Colts would be really interesting because I think Anthony Richardson could benefit big time from having Russell Wilson in the room.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one, but I still don't feel that way because I feel like the Steelers can't keep doing these one-year quarterback things and expecting to be able to build on it.
I think the Steelers are getting a temporary quarterback and they're going to draft Milroe at some point in the draft.
This will be their 3rd temporary quarterback since Big Ben, 4th if you count Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, but they're going to draft a developmental quarterback that they have a high upside for. It's basically going to be a clone of Justin Fields.
Okay. They haven't had the best luck of developing draftable quarterbacks in the recent memory. Actually, Tomlin, I don't believe ever has.
They've also had terrible luck in the first round, like the last 4 seasons.
Yeah. All right. So that brings us to Justin Fields. I believe he'll end up on the Raiders this year. Alex, what do you say?
I say he's on the Steelers. So we're flip-flopped on these 2 quarterbacks here.
So anything that gets out to the media, like Justin Fields is the favorite to go back to the Steelers, has to be leaked either by Justin Fields' side or Pittsburgh side. And then you have to realize why that one side leaked it. And it was likely leaked by the Steelers because they were trying to drive Russ's price down, in my opinion.
Well, in my opinion, the Steelers are the most transparent team in the NFL. And it's pretty obvious that when something leaks out about them, it almost always comes true.
Maybe. But didn't you have Ayuko in there last year?
I think that was pretty close. I mean,
I thought anything that leaks out comes true.
Yeah, but the Steelers can't control the 49ers giving him a new contract. Like
Well, the
I think
Steelers
they were
wouldn't
in
meet the
on it.
asking price. They wouldn't bring up their asking price.
I think that they were in on it.
Yeah,
But when it comes to the draft and like free agency moves, I mean they're very transparent.
absolutely. But there's no real reason to leak that information out to the media, though. Just sign them and just say, hey, announce the deal. Like, there's no real reason to announce that information unless it's a negotiation tactic.
All right. Well, where do we think
Right.
Daniel Jones is going?
I think he ends up with the Steelers, probably backing up Russell Wilson for this year.
This is very tough because the
You
next two
badly want to say
quarterbacks.
the Vikings because you just believe that everyone's gravitated towards the Vikings, but I think if he wanted to sign with them, he already would have. I thought that's what you just said about Russ.
Well, this is not going to find necessarily a better spot to go than stay with the Steelers. So it would make sense in that circumstance.
No, the Colts might be a better spot though, indoors. For what you said earlier, like
Yeah, they theoretically have a better offensive coordinator and more weapons. So yeah, that makes sense. But
yeah, I know. Why do you have to make sense on something like that? And he's a
it's just
grown up in the room.
but their defense is like a barn door that's wide open. So I don't know. It's those are probably the top two spots that he could be in.
Wait, Jim
Anyway,
Irsay's barn door is open? Better go
sure.
check that.
Well, they are the Colts. Makes sense that they'd be in a barn, right?
Yep.
All
So
right.
Jones, where you got him?
Jones and then the next guy are so closely linked. It's which one is going to end up staying with that team. I don't think Daniel Jones is going to be a Steeler. I do still lean for his counterpart, the next quarterback, Sam Darnold. I think the tag is still very much in play, which means bye bye Daniel Jones if that's the case. I almost want to say back to New York. But the Jets already have Tyrod, which I think they'd rather keep him. Ooh, where is a good spot? I'm gonna go Indianapolis for Daniel Jones.
Okay, we will see here. But brings us to the next one that you just mentioned, Sam Darnold. And I have him staying with the Vikings, and you have him with the Vikings on the tag. Anything else you want to add to Sammy?
I don't. If I was a team, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving him a multi-year deal based off of one season of success. So I think the tag makes sense. Obviously, that would leave some cap finagling for the Vikings to do to open up more space. And that wouldn't prevent them from potentially trading him at some point. They felt like J.J. McCarthy was coming on and ready to be the guy, and they wanted to trade Sam Darnold to get more picks. I think that would make sense too. And they might even trade him this offseason, even after tagging him.
Do you think they will?
Depends on how they feel about JJ McCarthy at this moment. If they like JJ McCarthy and they think he's ready to play week one, I would see if I could get a good deal for Sam Darnold. If not, you can hold on to Sam Darnold and trade him later or keep him and have that insurance.
Absolutely. It'll be really interesting, but it's asking a lot for a team to take $50 million and give up a pick for Sam Darnold, which is what the cap will probably be for quarterbacks. All right. What do you have happening with Mr. Kirk Cousins, who is currently employed by the Falcons? I have him remaining with the Falcons because he carries a $40 million dead cap hit. And his cap hit is $40 million, so they'd save $0 by cutting Kirk Cousins this year. So for them to cut him and then bring in, say, like a Daniel Jones to back up Michael Penix, you're probably looking at $50 million of total cap space wasted on the backup quarterback versus $40 million and just keeping Kirk Cousins. So for that reason, I'm going to go with remaining with the Falcons.
Yeah, I think the way you've laid it out is pretty succinct. So that indicates that he'll probably stay for at least one more year. Now, if a team came and offered them a decent package of picks to trade for him, I think they'd consider that too and eat the cap. But I agree. I think most likely at this point, stay on the Falcons one more year. All right. I just for giggles, I added one more. Matthew Stafford. Now there's some negotiations with the Los Angeles Rams. They're trying to find a number that makes sense for both of them. But in the background, there's the chance he could get traded to a team like the New York Giants, who may miss out on a quarterback in the top 3 of the NFL draft. What are the odds that you would place on Stafford staying with the Rams over being traded? Could you put a percentage or odds or anything like that?
I would say 95% chance he's back with the Rams next year.
I don't know that I'd be that confident. I think I would probably say 60% with the Rams.
Wow.
Is getting older for an athlete. I mean, not for a
Okay.
human being, but for an athlete. And they've already turned over their roster from a few years ago. Cup and Stafford, and I think there's an offensive lineman are the only ones that are left from their Super Bowl run. And I think they're getting rid of Cup. I think Stafford could be on his way in the next year or two, and it could make more sense to get rid of him now. I don't think that they'd get like the Giants' third overall pick or anything, but I do think they could get like their second round pick, which is I think the 34th or 35th pick in this draft. So that could be something, maybe more than that, and they could retool their team. But I still think it makes more sense to keep him one more year.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really have much to retool. They have a number 1 receiver, they have up and coming defense, they have tight ends, they have running backs. There's not much to retool left.
They need a corner. They need a wide receiver too, because if Cup's gone, they don't have one. They need a tight end. They need more offensive line help. They need a younger quarterback. I think they're missing a linebacker as well. So, I mean, they have spots of need for sure. And I know Colin Cowherd has floated out there that they could be looking for more first round picks next draft. So they have ammunition to trade up for one of these much better quarterback prospects in the 2026 draft.
Absolutely. So who do you got him going to? Staying with the Rams since
Staying
60%
with the
is bigger than
Rams.
40?
Yep.
All right. So we have that does it for quarterbacks. Let's talk a little bit about running backs. And the first one is Mr. Aaron Jones, who had his void date pushed back so he could continue to negotiate with the Vikings. I think for that reason, I'm going to keep him with the Vikings, but I don't feel super strongly about this because he didn't look great last year. He's clearly aging and injury riddled, to say the least. So we'll see if they bring him back for one more 1-year deal or if they decide to go younger here.
I also think that he's going to re-sign with the Vikings. He did almost have 1,500 total yards on offense, despite, as Jeff said, not looking that great. I do think part of that is on the offensive line and not just him. I do think he constantly played with ankle injuries and lower body injuries, but he played surprisingly, I think, every game in the regular season, which still shocks me. So yeah, I have him staying with the Vikings. I still think the Vikings will draft a running back in the 3rd round of the NFL draft as well, but I think they'll at least sign him for another season.
Yeah, so it'll be a 1-year, probably like $6 to $8 million deal, I could imagine. But will he accept that is the question. That's what I would want if I was the Viking.
All right, Jeff, we have
As you had
one of
mentioned,
your.
if they wanted to make a deal, they already would have.
Well, they're actually talking, and we know this because they extended the void date. So they're at least talking. So they do want to make a deal. One of your favorite running backs is next, Najee Harris. I think there's 2 obvious spots for him, and that one is going back to the Steelers, and the other is going to a team like the Chargers. I think he's a profile of back that Harbaugh looks for, a bruiser for the most part. They let all their other previous running backs pretty much go. They let Bell go. They let Connor go.
But didn't they sign Bell first to an extension or tag him or something?
I don't think so. I think they let him go and the Jets gave him a huge deal.
I thought that they tagged him and he sat out half the season. And then they didn't tag him a second time and the Jets picked him up.
Yeah, but the Steelers didn't give him a contract.
Right. But they just paid him as a top 5 back in the league for 1 year. So,
Oh yeah,
but I'm not
on a
saying
tag.
Harris is that or getting tagged, but could you get a transition tag?
He could. I could potentially see that. I think the Steelers make the most sense for him. I think he probably has a relatively soft market, and I think he'll be disappointed by that. So I say Steelers. What say you?
I will say the Steelers as well because I think that they have something good with Warren and him combined, and don't fix it if it ain't broken. And I could see another like $8 million deal here for him. Maybe a 2-year $16 million, 2-year $20 million deal, something like that. Like only 8 of it guaranteed or 10 of it guaranteed. But yeah, I could easily see him sticking there. But that brings us to Elijah Mitchell, who's almost certain to move on from his current job and role. He was the starter for the 49ers before they acquired Christian McCaffrey. Alex, do you see him going anywhere and making an impact?
He's an unrestricted free agent. Jordan Mason is a restricted free agent, but we don't know if they will tag Jordan Mason or not, or what level they will. But so Jordan
It'll
Mason
likely
probably stays
cost
around
them
for another
less than
year.
$3 million to bring back Jordan Mason. And I think that they do that 100%.
Yeah, and that'll just be for a year. Mitchell, you and I have similar thoughts on some of these players, especially the non-quarterbacks here. I think the Dolphins make sense to fill right in for Mostert.
You know who else
He'll be
makes
from
sense, though? The Texans. He could back up Joe Mixon. Okay.
no. The
He's
new
better than
offensive
Pierce.
coordinator. The new offensive coordinator is he's 2 years with McVay, and then before that was with Josh McDaniels. So he's not from the Kyle Shanahan tree. So
But last I
Mitchell,
checked, offensive coordinators don't hire players. The head coach and the GM do.
they're not going to do it if the offensive coordinator doesn't want to work with them. Although he is more flexible than Bobby Slowick was
Yeah.
with how he
I
wants to
couldn't
do
see
things.
an OC be like, no, you want to bring in this guy so bad, I don't want to work with him.
Yeah.
Especially a new one.
I think that they address running back through the draft. I don't think that they throw money at any free agent right now. The only free agent I want them to spend money on is on the offensive line.
So who do you got him going to?
So I have Mitchell going to the Dolphins.
All right. So we agree with that. The Dolphins, because it makes sense to put him back with Mike McDaniel. All right.
It's going to be a recurring theme for the next guy too.
Alex, I got J.K. Dobbins, and I got him sticking with the Chargers here. What are you looking at for this?
I think that's the only thing that makes sense is him back with the Chargers. I don't think that they'll stop with just J.K. Dobbins, but they have to re-sign him, and Dobbins really doesn't have any other suitors, I don't think. So it makes a lot of sense for him to stay there.
Absolutely. Just can he stay healthy? He looked good when he was healthy, but that'll always be the age-old question when it comes to J.K. Dobbins. All right, here's the big one. Nick Chubb. What do you see happening with Nick Chubb? Free agent for the first time. What do you got going on?
I really don't know what happens with him. I think he stays on the free agent market for a bit while teams assess his medical concerns. I think he doesn't sign until maybe after the draft, and I don't know what team that's going to be.
Wow. I'm a little surprised about that, sir. Medically, he looked fine and he looked like he was getting stronger. He just ended up suffering a soft tissue injury, which is likely healed by now. So, obviously, when you sign somebody, you're going to have to get a physical. He's 29 years old, so he's likely got a year or two left at his current before he drops fully off of a cliff. Because I think that he's a little bit better than an average running back that would drop off at 28 years old. But just looking at some depth charts here, it may make sense for Chubb to go back to Cleveland. It may make sense for him to go to like a Denver. Could make sense in Minnesota if they whiff on Aaron Jones. But I'm going to go on a limb here, Alex, and I'm going to say that Nick Chubb signs relatively early, so the first week of free agency, and I got him going to Dallas.
Throw out a guess.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw it out for a team that doesn't necessarily need a starter right away, but could use an upgrade, and that is the Washington Commanders. I think he would be good behind Brian Robinson Jr., and I think when he comes back fully healthy, he could supplant him, or they could be a nice tandem.
Yeah, his value would be tanked if that happened. So let's hope not. And let's move on to the next one, which is Javonte Williams. This one's really hard because I don't see him going back to Denver. I saw them kind of moving away from him throughout the year. So we got to find a new spot on the bus for Javonte Williams. And for the sake of discussion and conversation, I would want him to go to a place that already has like a receiving back in line. Steelers come to mind on this one, but I have Najee going back there currently. But if they do not get Najee, I could see pairing him with Warren. But Alex, just for the sake of this discussion, I'm gonna have Javonte Williams go to the Browns.
I've really tried to figure this one out because this is like Nick Chubb is a wild card where he's gonna go because I think we both know or both get the impression that Javonte is not staying with the Broncos. So I think that means he probably goes to another AFC West team. And to me, it comes down to the Raiders or the Chiefs. And I think I'm leaning Chiefs because I think the Chiefs want to spend their draft capital on restocking their offensive line in some defensive positions. So I think that they will do what they've been doing the past few years and bringing in veteran running back help. And I think Javonte Williams wants a chance at getting a ring. So I think it's a natural fit for both of them. He's more well-rounded than Pacheco, but Pacheco can be the sledgehammer. So I think
Okay.
Javonte will be the receiving back for that team.
Wow. I didn't see him with that much receiving ability, but we will see. We will see. And Pacheco, I expect, will be underdrafted this upcoming year because of his leg injury this last year. And I don't think that he was able to run with the full strength of that leg. And that's part of what made him special, Pacheco. We'll see if he can regain it, because if he can, he might be a steal in drafts next year. Alex, we got to talk a little bit about some lesser running backs here. Rico Dowdle, he is a free agent from the Cowboys. Cowboys could easily re-sign him, but I do expect him to move on and get out of that mess a little bit. And I would believe that the Vikings, who basically just have Ty Chandler right now on their roster, aren't happy. Indianapolis has a few scrubs behind Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to put Rico Dowdle on the Colts here and have him back up Jonathan Taylor.
I'm going to have Dottle re-sign with the Cowboys.
Okay. All right, Alex, you want to break down Cam Akers? He's our next guy, and we have 2 running backs left.
I think Cam Akers will be back with the Vikings as well.
Yeah, I believe so too. And I believe if they don't sign Aaron Jones, he has a good chance to be the starter going into next year, considering how few draft picks and capital that they have.
That's true. I think that they will resign both of those guys for reasonably cheap contracts, and then I think they'll draft a running back in the draft as well.
Absolutely. And I saw that we had a little discussion earlier this week offline about Aaron Jones and Cam Akers, and I believe that down the stretch, Aaron Jones fell off and Cam Akers remained steady. And I think Akers was the better running back, at least in the playoffs, than Aaron Jones was. And even that last game against Detroit.
I think Aaron Jones was the better running back, and I think the only thing Cam Akers has going for him is he had a 56-yard run. If you take that out and you take Aaron Jones's longest run out, Aaron Jones's stats across the board are significantly better. I just think Cam Akers was more cost efficient because he's significantly cheaper than Aaron Jones and put up almost as good stats. So if you want to look at it cost efficient wise, then Cam Akers was better bang for your buck, but the better running back overall was Aaron Jones.
I thought Akers had 1.1 yards per carry better than Jones, and they both had very similar. They both had enough carries where that would actually be something to weigh out.
I think it's 0.01 or something like that. Like it was marginally better, but again, it's because he had one run that was longer than any run that Aaron Jones had. And if you take that one out, the average drops a lot. So
let's take out Jones' number 1 run then too. But that explosive run is important.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Jones is like 33 yards or something like that, and Akers was 56, and outside of that, he had a lot of short runs.
He had made a lot of good plays in that Detroit and then the playoff game as well when Jones couldn't get anything going. That's what stuck in my memory. And maybe Jones wore down because he's not used to playing 17 or 18 games in a season.
Well, and I think the Vikings offensive line is pretty terrible right now, especially when they got their left tackle hurt early on in the season and had to replace him with Cam Robinson, and that it takes time to get him adjusted.
I think that speaks
The
to how
fact
well
that Aaron
Darnold did.
Jones got the fact that Aaron Jones got almost 1,500 yards of scrimmage yards is insane with that offensive line, and also Sam Darnold did really well with that offensive line. So I expect efficiency to improve for the running game next year and the passing game to decline.
Awesome.
Okay, we got one more running back, and then we're on to a slew of wide receivers. So we talked about it earlier. Raheem Mostert was released by the Dolphins, which I think means he's not going to be back with them. And the obvious fit, in my opinion, is the San Francisco 49ers as a very cheap veteran depth piece there. That's where I see him going. He could be maybe a veteran backup for the Texans for super cheap. So could Cam Akers, honestly. But I have 49ers as the most likely place for him to land.
Oh, man, sir, you just like to do the path of least resistance.
I just like to do the most likely thing.
Yes and no. This seems more like a Cowboys move to make, to be honest. Bringing an old running back, trying to retread him. But you have to remember that the 49ers have Juszczyk, they have Garendo, they have CMC, they have Mitchell, they have Mason, or not Mitchell, they have Mason, and they have, so that's 4 running backs already under their roster. Who, like, I don't think Mostert at 32 is better than any of those 4.
Juszczyk is not a running back. He's a fullback tight end hybrid. He barely ever actually runs. The 49ers almost always have 4 running backs on the roster.
They got Israel Abakanda.
They've had running backs go down a lot, so they're going to keep a lot of running backs on their team, and that does not mean that Mostert will make the 53-man roster when the season comes around. It just means he is going to sign with them initially, in my opinion. And the more I think about it, I initially thought that they're going to draft a couple running backs in this draft, and they might draft one, but they have so many needs that nobody thought that they'd actually have that I think that they're going to have to address some depth positions in free agency and try to search in the bargain bin. And Raheem Mostert is a bargain bin type player for them.
Absolutely. So we'll see what happens here, but the Cowboys love the bargain bin for running backs as well, and especially older running backs. Although I haven't really seen the 49ers bring in older running backs towards the end of their career, so that would be an interesting move to bring Mostert back. All right. So we're on to the wide receivers, and I kind of grouped these into categories. There's a few categories here. The first one came on later in the season. Dyami Brown, where do you expect him to end up?
I would expect him to stay with the Washington Commanders, and if we were picking a second team, I would say the Eagles. But I'm just going with the Washington Commanders.
So the Eagles need another Commanders wide receiver on their roster because they already got their top 3 spots filled with Dotson, Brown, and Smith. But not only that, they also drafted Johnny Wilson and rookie receiver Smith last year. So they are packed tight. But I'm going to go
You're going to go the Eagles anyway?
Well.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go the Eagles anyway after saying all of that. All right. Let's go with your favorite low-key guy right now. Mac Hollins was with the Bills this year, started to pick up some key catches. I think he's a little overrated. Do you think he was a vital role player on the offensive scheme? Where do you think Mac Hollins goes?
He made 2 great catches in that AFC Championship game where if they had won, it would have been because of Mac Hollins. I think that his legend is growing just by the way that he enters the building in Buffalo with shoeless and an outfit. I don't see there's any way, unless he asks for like $15 million a season, that the Bills don't bring back Mac Hollins. Like, I think he's loved by the community, and I think that's enough reason.
I think the Bills also make the most sense. I don't really know where outside of Buffalo he would be attractive. So I'm going with the Bills as well.
All right. Your buddy, MVS, where you got him going? Marquez Valdez Scantling.
Why is it he is more successful everywhere but Green Bay? I don't
He
understand
was not
what's.
successful in Buffalo. I can confirm that over
Oh,
here.
well, that's true. Green, it's just not successful up north. It's Kansas City and the New Orleans Saints. Honestly, I think the Saints should bring him back. Everyone's putting wide receiver as a need for the Saints this offseason. They have Olave, they have, it's not Shaheed. And if they
Raheem
bring MVS
Shaheed.
back, I think the Saints receivers are just fine. I think he should stay with the Saints.
Sounds good. I got him with the Saints as well because he adds that safety net with how Raheem Shaheed returns from his injuries. Kind of filled in that role a little bit, and it might be nice to have two gunners because it is a lot harder to cover two gunners than ones. There you go. What about Demarcus Robinson? Is he going to be the Rams' number 2 receiver next year or move on to another team?
I think he should stay with the Rams. I do think someone's going to throw money at him, kind of like the Gabe Davis thing.
Yeah, absolutely they could. Who would you think would send some money his way?
I think the Commanders have the most money, so
Not a
I
bad
could see
move.
I could see the Commanders going after him.
So he's going to be 31 at the beginning of the season, so it depends how much money that they send at him.
True.
And it depends how much he likes living in LA. I think the Chargers are a realistic expectation of that too, just because there might be an individual that likes living in LA. So you're picking the Commanders or the Rams?
I'm picking the Commanders.
I have them sticking with the Rams, and the Chargers are my backup plan. All right. So Nick Westbrook Ikine is your buddy that you franchise tagged in a league.
No, I didn't franchise tag him. I extended him for a really cheap
You
deal.
did.
Well, it's only cheap if he actually signs with the team and has a prominent role. It's not cheap if he doesn't have a role. I think he probably stays with the Tennessee Titans. It makes the most sense. He got 9 touchdowns with them last year. It looked like he was coming on. It looked like things were shifting his way. I think it can be at least a wide receiver 3 for a team. I predict the Tennessee Titans a reunion.
Okay. I mean, I guess it depends who's quarterback there. If it's Aaron Rodgers, he may not be back. Might be Alan
Yeah.
Lazard in that role.
Oh my God. He needs to retire. I'm sick of Alan Lazard. Westbrook Ikine is actually like a young version of him, in my opinion. So just pretend he's Alan Lazard.
How old do you think Nick Westbrook Ikine is?
27? 26?
He's 27. He'll be 28 next month.
Okay.
So he's not a spring chicken. Wouldn't expect someone to throw a ton of money his way, but some.
How old is Lazard?
Alan, Mr. Rogers' favorite target, is currently 29. And he'll be 29 until December. So they're roughly...
Ikine is a better version of him, in my opinion. That's a year younger.
Westbrook Ikine's only had one good year in his career.
And that was touchdown heavy.
Very. So we'll see. We will see. But so you got him sticking with the Titans. You know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to say that when Adams is cleared out, when Lazard's cleared out, that he goes and signs with the Jets.
Interesting.
Jets, Jets. All right. So we have the next crop of crew here. Wide receivers that underperformed in 2024. Tyler Boyd, where you got him going?
He's either staying with the Titans or he's going back to the Bengals then move on from Higgins. So
Which one you got?
I think he's also staying with the Titans.
I got him going back to the Bengals. As you were just saying that, I was thinking that Jermaine Burton isn't it. They drafted Jermaine Burton to be his replacement, and he's had a lot of issues. So we need to move back to Boyd here while we figure it out.
That might be the play.
Brandon Cooks, where you got him?
I'll let you go with Brandon Cooks first. I'm trying to figure him out.
Yeah, I think he's going to play this year. He's a team that I could easily see going to a Giants or even back to Houston, but I'm going to sign him up for the Washington Commanders on this. Think that he's a good 1-year veteran, and I think they've been very smart with deals and contracts lately, and this is a no-risk deal, in my opinion.
I'm going to have him resign with the Cowboys.
Wow.
I think the Commanders is a nice guess too.
Josh Palmer, where you got him going?
Well, I know there's a Bills commentator that I follow that thinks he'd be a good fit for the Bills, but I don't like how he dropped the ball and didn't perform in a year where Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were gone. He should have stepped up a little more. I think where could he go? I think Josh Palmer is going to end up on the Raiders.
I got him going to the Saints, and he'll follow his former head coach, who is now the defensive coordinator of the Saints. So Brandon Staley.
Hey, we've got two former Steelers wide receivers, sort of. Mike Williams and Deontay Johnson. Where do we think these two end up?
So Mike Williams first will he might take a little while to sign, but he will eventually sign. He'll be a number 3 for a team that needs a number 3. I don't see him going back to the Steelers. I think his time with the Jets were very soured. There's a chance that he ends up back with the Chargers, and that's where I'm going to put him this year, is back with the Chargers. They didn't have to pay him during his torn ACL recovery year, and now they get to bring him back, and he already has chemistry with Justin Herbert.
I think he ends up with the Denver Broncos because they need to add a veteran.
But they got Bailey.
I think I don't like Bailey, but that doesn't mean I think Mike Williams is going to have a good year. I think he's a reasonable price. They need wide receiver. He has a chance to start, and I think that's an okay fit. What about Deontay Johnson?
If Pete Carroll was not in the Raiders, this would be a complete Raiders hire at this point in his career. But he is, so we have to move on to other dumpster fires around the league. And I think there's teams like the Giants that are a dumpster fire, but they're very offensively focused. But there's one team here that has no wide receivers and traded away Deontay last year, because I think there's a chance that they could trade away George Pickens. I think that he reunites with the Steelers this year. No thoughts on Deontay, I see.
I just feel like he's burned so many bridges, and that's got to be noticed by other teams too. I'm trying to think of a team that could keep him in check. I think the only team I can think of at this moment is the Baltimore Ravens, who reclaimed him, and maybe they only did it for potential compensation picks, but I think he needs a disciplinarian head coach, and I think they might be the only ones who can do it, or maybe the other Harbaugh with the Chargers.
Did he really burn his? I mean, the Chargers did put a claim in for him last year before he ended up with the Texans, I believe.
I changed my vote. I'm putting him on the Chargers.
Okay. That's an interesting one, and I could definitely see it, but with the deck fully empty now, I could definitely see him going back to the Steelers. Steelers got rid of him because he was asking for a new deal, but as you can see, there's not a market for him now, so he might have to come back to them with his tail between his legs, and that's why I picked him. All right. So, Alex, we have Keenan Allen left. Who do you believe signs Keenan Allen?
Well, he basically said Chicago or LA or he retires. I don't necessarily think he'll rush to Chicago. I don't think that the Chargers will necessarily bring him in because he kind of overlaps skill sets with McConkey. So I think he replaces Cooper Kupp with the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, I think him and Caleb Williams have such a friendship outside that I think that they'll keep him around for Caleb Williams, but that's just my guess.
I think he wants back to LA.
But that's a good observation. It's warmer there. I always will say that. That's like a tiebreaker, is the weather places. And speaking of the Bears, I saw that recently they just released Gerald Everett, their tight end. So they're trying to conserve some space. I think his career is pretty much over, but we remember him having a good year back in the day.
Okay.
I think with the Rams, right?
Yeah.
So we just did Bears Rams for Keenan Allen, and he was a Bear Ram. So interesting. All right, Amari
He was a Charger.
Cooper. Yeah, Amari.
He
dropped the pass that would have beaten the Chiefs, or he lazily ran his route and got picked off because he lazily ran his route. And it turned into a pick six instead of a touchdown. The Chargers did not re-sign him after that year, so interesting. All right, I digress though. Amari Cooper is up. He was traded from the Browns to the Bills last year. Don't see him remaining in Buffalo this year. I don't see him being a big part of any team, to be honest. I see him potentially, Alex, what do you think about this? A reunion with the Dallas Cowboys.
I was thinking that, but I'm
I
like,
said
shoot,
it.
I put Brandon Cooks on the Cowboys. I can't see room for both of them.
You're putting all the wrong
I
people on there.
I'm gonna say he stays in New York, but he goes to Buffalo. Not Buffalo. The Giants.
You said that all like
I got it
poetically.
all backwards. I started thinking about something else while I was talking, and it completely derailed what I was saying. He goes from
And for the
Buffalo
record,
to
for
the
the record,
Giants.
for the record, the Giants
Stop
nor the
saying that
Jets
they're in New Jersey. Huh?
do not play in New York.
Yeah. Until they change from New York Giants to New Jersey Giants, I'm gonna keep saying New York Giants.
You know why they do that, right? No, but you
And
said he's going to play for another team in New York. That's factually incorrect.
they call it the New York Giants. They don't call it the New Jersey Giants. When they
I
call it
know,
the New Jersey Giants, I will say New Jersey.
but I just wanted to be clear that he will not be playing in New York, like you had stated.
He will when he plays the
That's true. That's true. But Alex, I digress. The Bills are the only New York team. The reason for that is the Jets and the Giants do not want to pay the New York State tax, but they want the New York State name. So that's their little workaround of it, is they just play right across the river in New Jersey.
well, it sounds like New York needs to lower their taxes.
Maybe. Or they need to quit hanging on New York.
Maybe.
All right, we got one of your favorites. Is he going to reunite with the Texans? We have DeAndre Hopkins, Alex.
I would love for him to come back to the Texans. I don't think that will happen. Um, I think really the only thing left for him is to keep chasing rings. So I think he stays in Kansas City. Needs a nice veteran depth piece for the Chiefs with Worthy and Rice, and especially with Rice missing time due to an injury and possible suspension. I think it makes sense to keep him.
Yeah, I can completely see that. I mean, he went from the Texans, Titans, Cardinals. So he's done like a loop of teams so far. So I could see him not wanting to move again. But in some regards, I could see a team like the Lions that believe they're one weapon away signing him. So I'm going to go with the Lions for this one.
Interesting. I don't think you
Why?
realize that he will only play for a team with red in their color scheme.
Oops.
Yep. You should recalculate. I was
that-
thinking maybe the
Was the
Patriots.
Titans red then?
They have red, actually, in their logo.
But I wouldn't necessarily call them a red color scheme.
That's true. That's true.
He had the powder blues, just like the Lions.
Yeah.
But think about it though, Goff. I mean, if Cup doesn't go there, because Cup could easily go there, we all admit that. But if Cup doesn't go there, you have St. Brown, you have Hopkins that could play the outside, and then you have Williams that could play the other outside, and then you have their tight end. His name is slipping my Laporta. Yes. So I could see them looking for a veteran to pair on the outside with Jameson Williams.
I mean, that would be nice. I could see the Ravens as a possibility, although they don't have red. So, I could see New England as a possibility. They were already a team that was interested last couple times he was available. So, those are possibilities. I just think the Chiefs make the most sense. They're ready to go again, pretty much. All they need is Mahomes and Andy Reid and Spags, and they're ready no matter what their personnel is.
All right, let's move on to the next crop of guys. We'll call them the coming back from injury guys. First one is Stefon Diggs, returning from a torn ACL. Alex, where do you see him going, and who do you see him signing with?
I see him signing with the Cowboys on a cheap deal to reunite with his brother. That's what I see.
Interesting. I see him staying in Houston and playing with the Texans.
All right, let's move on to Hollywood Brown. Where do you see Hollywood going?
This is one that I expect to stick with the Chiefs. He's going to be a good beginning of the season guy before Rashee Rice comes back from his suspension and torn ACL. And then he'll be relegated to the number 3 duties behind Worthy and Rice when they're both out there.
I don't know what to do with him. I keep racking my brain. I don't think he'll be back with the Chiefs. So
That's a
where
180 from a couple of weeks ago.
I know. I don't know what to do with him, to be honest with you. I'm just gonna say a team that is terrible at scouting, especially offensive skill position players. I'm gonna go with the Jets because they're likely to move on from one of their guys.
No, I completely agree. Next up is Chris Godwin. It sounds like him and the Buccaneers are working towards a new deal. Who knows if they agree on a new deal? What's your thoughts there?
I think he stays with Tampa. I think we both have a similar thought that if he doesn't stay in Tampa, the Commanders are a very attractive team for him to go to. Those are the two most likely, but I say Tampa.
Yeah, I have him going to the Commanders.
They have the
So they
money
would
to chase him for sure.
so they would spend like 3 years, 60 million roughly, maybe a little bit more for Chris Godwin, and they would spend like 1 year, 8 million on Brandon Cooks, and then they'd be rolling out Brandon Cooks, Chris Godwin, and Terry McLaurin. So I think that would be pretty scary if you ask me. All right. But I could see the Buccaneers re-signing him. It depends how much they want to spend, and they also drafted Jalen McMillan last year as a replacement. So we'll see. And he actually looked good down the stretch. So they have some safety net if he doesn't resign. So then we got to talk about superstars. And I know you disagree with this, but he definitely puts up superstar numbers when he's playing. He's definitely a superstar in fantasy. T. Higgins, where do you got him going, Alex?
Yeah. There's a lot of teams that were interested in going after him, and he's been tagged, or most likely to be tagged, by the Bengals at this point. So I have him staying on the Bengals this year.
Yeah, I have him staying on the Bengals too, but man, that tag's getting more and more expensive every year, so they should have just re-signed him a while ago.
It's still
gone through this.
This tag is cheaper than giving him a contract now because it's I think 3.5 million cheaper than the average per year for him right now. It's 26.5 and they're expected to have to pay him 30 million per year. So it is technically cheaper. They are saving a penny.
Yeah, but picture what that contract would have been if they signed him 2 seasons ago when they could have. Would have that been cheaper or more expensive?
Could have been 18, 19 million per year.
Yep. And then they wouldn't have even had to rack their brains with these discussions every year.
Yeah. Okay. So we have lots of trade/cut candidates coming up as well that we can talk about. Ones that have already been brought to light are Deebo Samuel and Cooper Kupp. Both teams have already announced that they're going to move on from those two players, whether trade or cut. We're speculating on Devontae Adams being cut or traded as well. Tyler Lockett, Christian Kirk are also cut candidates or trade candidates. Michael Pittman might be a dark horse trade candidate because the Colts are already loaded at wide receiver. They have Josh Downs, they have Alec Pierce, they have A.D. Mitchell, and they're probably looking to improve their tight end position, bolster their offensive line, bring in another quarterback, and bolster the defense. So he might be a trade piece to get more assets or trade for another player. It's a possibility, and he was discontent with how much he was getting targeted last year. So let's talk about these guys and talk about the likeliness they're gone and where they'd go. Deebo Samuel, where does he go? We know they're moving on from him. Where do you think is the best spot for him?
So that is a great question. Where do you have him going again?
Where do I have him going?
Yeah.
Oh, man, we don't even have Tyreek Hill on here. Tyreek Hill might be a trade candidate too. If Tyreek Hill gets traded from the Dolphins, I think Deebo would be a great fit for Miami.
I think Debo's a good fit there either way.
Yeah.
Because you still need a third receiver in this league.
Yeah, I think Miami makes the most sense for Deebo, regardless.
Yeah, I think Tyreek stays because it's better for Tyreek to stay. All his children are there.
Mm-hmm.
And what Mike McDaniel worships is that speed. It doesn't make sense to move off of him just for a spat at the end of the season.
So where do you think Deebo goes? Do you think it is the Dolphins or somewhere else?
Yeah, I got him going to the Dolphins. He'll play Raheem Mostert's spot plus Braxton Berrios' spot, which we didn't put him in the superstar category here, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's such a superstar. All right. Well, who is a superstar is Cooper Cup. They want to move on from him. They don't want to pay his salary. They might think he's done. Cooper Cup wants to keep playing. Where is he going to keep playing, Jeff?
So he's going to play in Los Angeles with the Chargers.
I had entertained the thought that he might be a good selection for the Texans because the Texans brought in a Rams coach, Nick Caley. I don't think he'll really slide into that cap. Oh, unless he's cut, he might go for a cheaper deal. I do think he wants to stay in Los Angeles. So this is a long end around. I think those are the two likely teams. I do think the Chargers are the most likely at this point. I think he'd be a good Harbaugh player.
No, for sure. I completely agree with that. And the other thing is he's most likely to be cut because the owner would have to pay like upwards of $10 million to take on and pay and trade him, and versus cutting him, and they only save $5 million versus the cap, but he pays $0 out of his pocket. So he's a more likely cut candidate.
All right. Davante Adams might be following Aaron Rodgers out of the New York/New Jersey Jets. Where is his best landing spot?
He's going to end up with wherever Aaron Rodgers ends up, and I believe it's going to be with the Titans.
I concur it's going to be wherever Aaron Rodgers ends up. I also said the Titans for Aaron Rodgers, so I'm going to say the Titans for Davante Adams too.
So, Alex, I have Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball. I have I have Aaron Rodgers. So Adams is catching the ball and Ridley's catching the ball on the other side. Then they have Chigo. They'd be pretty stacked going into this year.
So in addition to Rodgers and Ridley and Adams, I would also have them having Boyd and Westbrook and Keeney as well. I think Trey Burks is someone they might have to trade or cut. I don't think he's ever going to develop into something at this point. But I do think that they could try to upgrade from Chig O in this draft. This is a good tight end draft. So that would be interesting as well.
Yeah, I agree. I love that team because that team could actually win the division just with Rodgers and Adams and Ridley and Pollard.
Well, it depends on what the other teams do as well, because I could see the Jaguars massively improve too. I could see the Colts massively improve. I could see the Texans stay on top. There's a lot of movement that could happen depending on how the offseason goes. But yeah.
All right. So we are up to Michael Pittman, who you believe could be traded, but I have him staying with the Colts. Where do you think his most likely destination is for 2025?
I don't think if he's going to get traded, I think it might be after the draft, honestly. So I think he's leaning towards being with the Colts still. I do think that he could interest teams that miss out on a wide receiver in this offseason, whoever.
But there's a chance that they get a big boy quarterback like Rodgers or Darnold or Wilson, and there's plenty of balls for him to catch then.
Well, if they get Rodgers and then all of a sudden Adams as well, there's not space for all those wide receivers. So
Downs, Adams, and Pittman in 3 receiver sets.
I still like A.D. Mitchell a lot too.
You can't be wrong on Downs here. You got to always change it back to Mitchell, but Downs has been phenomenal his first 2 years.
No, they're different receivers. Mitchell is more of a speed receiver. Downs is more of a
Could be his
possession
MVS.
receiver. I like Downs. I don't dislike Downs at all. I'm just saying there's so many wide receivers. There's Alec Pierce as well. At some point, you have to make the cost analysis and say, we really like the really young guys. I know we just paid Pittman. Someone else is going to want Pittman as their number 1 or number 2, and we can roll with these 3 young guys.
That's true.
That's all I'm saying.
That's true. I mean, it really depends how close that they think that they are. If they think they're a quarterback away and they get that quarterback, they're not going to trade
True
pieces, but we'll see. All right. Speaking of another trade candidate potential, I know they're discussing a lower deal, but Tyler Lockett could move on from the Seattle Seahawks this year. Alex, where do you think is his most likely spot that he'll be?
The Raiders, reunite with Pete Carroll.
I like that. But I'm not going to copy you, even though I like that. And I'm going to have him stay with the the Seahawks. I think he'll agree to like a 1-year, $4 million deal and be like their fourth receiver this upcoming year.
All right.
All right. Christian
Last-
Kirk.
Last wide receiver for us.
Your boy. You've loved him. He could stay in Jacksonville just as easy as he could move on.
I definitely really like him. Would love for him to go to a good situation. I don't know who would potentially pick him up should he get cut or traded. Do you think he stays in Jacksonville?
I mean, a new coaching staff gives that all a possibility now.
But they didn't select him. Isn't that one of your things that you say? They didn't select him?
It's definitely one of my things, and I don't think he'll stay, but it's possible. Like before, they were definitely going to get rid of him. So what I'm saying is that the new people coming in aren't definitely going to get rid of him. I think he's expensive. I think they've got too much cap and resources dedicated to wide receiver. So I think that they move him. The question is where, and I think that they would move him to an NFC team, mostly because I can't see him playing for an AFC team again. Rams make a lot of sense, so I'm gonna go with the Rams.
I don't think that they can trade him. I think that they cut him. So I think he's free to go wherever he wants at that point. I'm gonna make a completely random guess because I have no idea where he could go. But if he is available for a reasonable contract, I could see him being a cheap veteran backup for the Texans. So I think that could be interesting. He'd have maybe some inside scoop on the Jaguars. The Texans have played him a couple years now. They would have film study on him. He could play that inside role, fill in for an injured Tank Dell. Would allow the Texans some flexibility in the draft. They wouldn't feel pressured to take a wide receiver early if the board didn't dictate that. I'd like the Texans to be a little bit flexible to be able to go after an offensive lineman, maybe pivot to the defense if they need to. So I would like them to go maybe a cheap veteran who is a better quality than Robert Woods was, and also an offensive lineman in the free agency, and then in the draft, show some flexibility. So Texans for Christian Kirk as a dark horse is what I'm going with.
All right. So now we have a few tight ends that we can quickly speed through. Where do you got Mike Gesicki?
I think he stays with Cincinnati. I think that's the team he's had the most success with.
Yeah, I got him staying with Cincinnati as well. What about Juwan Johnson?
Juwan Johnson's going to stay with the Saints. I would have put him with the Broncos, but I think they're going to be able to take a tight end in this draft.
I have them I'm going to the Broncos. They traded Dulcich last year, so they have more than one spot available for tight end. Or I have him going to the Broncos, sorry. What about Tyler Conklin?
Oh, man, I really don't know where he would go. I'm trying to think of another tight end needy team. Maybe the Chargers. They like to use multiple tight ends, and they might not get one of the top guys in this draft. So I'll go Chargers for Conklin.
I am going to go with, it could be as easy as the Texans, because the Texans have had bad luck with keeping tight ends healthy. But I'm going to go with the Patriots here.
That's an interesting choice.
And then Zach Ertz is next.
I have Zach Ertz staying with the Commanders.
I have him staying with the Commanders as well. And that kind of makes sense. And they'll probably bring in a young guy as well. And what do you think happens with Travis Kelce there?
I think he keeps playing, and I think he stays with the Chiefs.
Well, he can only stay with the Chiefs because he's under contract.
Well, I don't think they're going to cut him.
Right. I don't think they ever would. The Swifties would come after the Chiefs. But I'm going to go with he retires, because once you start thinking about retirement, you retire.
Yeah, I think he could want to manage his brother's beer company. So
I think he just wants to retire from being hit all the time.
That's true. All right. Well, that does it for this episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading or listening to this episode. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
You can find us on all podcasting apps by searching N2E Fantasy and with our handle at N2E Fantasy on all social media platforms. Please join our community and give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.